Okay, so hey guys, and welcome back to another weekly fighting roundup. And of course, got the boxing and MMA news today. And so, if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so. Like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So, going in, of course, starting with the boxing news, Garcia will fight Ampo December 30th as an exhibition. Obviously, he's banned from professional boxing, so it's interesting that he's even really allowed to do this. But Ampo fought Pacquiao in an exhibition a few months ago, so Garcia has seemingly gotten some sort of license or registration to be allowed to box in Japan, so it seems like that's what he's actually going to do. And Garcia has also called out Paul alongside Dubois as well, both calling out Jake Paul. It's an interesting one. I mean, Dubois Paul just isn't going to happen, but I suppose it was intriguing to see that he called him out. And I suppose Dubois, not as big of a name online as that of what you'd think he would be as a world heavyweight champion. But I think that will come with time, and maybe a Jake Paul fight would help in that aspect. Vucitus versus Ivic, Parr versus O'Connell, Scott versus Robinson, Raider versus Reynolds, and Peters will fight December 13th. Warren has said he won't rematch. No, he won't uh, rematch Joshua soon. So Dubois won't rematch Joshua soon. So it seems like that's not going to happen for a while, just because I think Warren's going to let Dubois fight on that February 22nd card from the seams of it. So he's going to fight on that one against an opponent in which is probably going to be Joseph Parker, and then he's going to get called the mandatory from the IBF, which will be either Kabiel, Zhang, or Bakoli, whoever's in that position at that time. So, it seems like that Joshua fight's going to get kind of pushed away, and there's no real kind of want for it, I suppose. I think Joshua's eager to wait it out and get the Fury fight going and everything like that. So it seems like I say, they don't seem too keen to remake that fight again. And I suppose it does make sense financially, realistically. Price versus Matthias, McKenna versus Cutler, Riley, Jeffers, Stringer, and Cartwright will fight December 14th. Cardosa will fight Ramirez December 11th. Stanionis has agreed a deal to fight Giasov, and I think that is a very underrated fight. I think they are both excellent fighters. Stanionis as a champion is somebody who I'm very intrigued by. Obviously, like I mentioned in some other videos, the welterweight division isn't the most stacked at the moment, but with the likes of somebody like a Stanionis, I think he's a very underrated champion who can still progress at his own pace. He's in no real rush to progress because he's still relatively new in his professional rankings, but he's very skilled from the seams of it. Flynn and Hussein will fight to December 8th. Taylor has joined Salita Promotions. Jalolov is set to fight Spielmont February 6th, and that's an interesting fight. I mean, Jalolov is coming off becoming heavyweight or super heavyweight Olympic champion for, I believe, a second time, which is crazy in itself. He's already, I believe, 12-0 in pro ranks or something like that. So I just don't see like an opponent like this is going to do anything for him. I think it's just, I think he's faced better opponents in the Olympics, and he's also faced better opponents in the pro ranks. So there's no, I don't see the point in having these fights for him still. I think he is a very, very skilled, excellent heavyweight, and he could be moved along quicker than what he is now. And, I suppose there isn't really a rush with him, but I just think skill wise he's levels above these. But, of course, it seems like that fight's going to happen. Navarro will fight Valtierra December 7th. Janabek has called out Canelo. He's basically said that nobody else is willing to fight him. And, when you think about it, Shiraz isn't going to fight him. It's probably going to be him versus Adamus next. Lara, I'm not too sure what's happening with Lara, but, he only fights against opponents in which he believes he can beat. Or, I don't think he's going to just fight anybody. And then, like I say, there's not really any other people about that's going to do it. So maybe a Eubank Junior fight, but he's called out Canelo, and Canelo hasn't really got loads of options that are high level at the moment. So perhaps that's a fight in which could possibly happen. Moving on, Tiki Toki versus Warrior, Deji versus Savage, Lamal versus Spencer, Cray Cray versus Yudi Gang, Demore versus Kells, Pineda versus Swarms, and Anderson versus Niraj will fight November 28th. So that is the Qatar Misfits carding which is happening this coming weekend, and that's the whole card. There's some big names involved in it, and I'll do a prediction for it this week. But yeah, in general, it's a stacked card, and when KSI is not fighting, there's not really too much going on in the way of misfits. But that this is a good card, and I think it's going to highlight some of the other talent involved in misfits. Moving on, Walsh is in talks to fight Ajiako, which I think is a great fight, and hopefully that will happen. Opetaya will fight Sin Cara January 8th. It's a homecoming type fight, which normally means a bit of a lesser opponent, and it's a mandatory opponent, so it's no real surprise. But yeah, that's a good fight as well. His Excellency Turki Al-Sheikh has turned down the opportunity to promote Khan versus Pacquiao. It seems like His Excellency is only really keen in kind of promoting proper boxing, I suppose. He's not really too bothered by people coming out of retirement to fight and things like that, and I respect that. But apparently, Pacquiao's been offered the fight in a different country, and it's in the ball's in his court if that fight's going to happen. That fight's been talked about happening for years. I very much doubt it ever will happen, but we'll see. Nico won by unanimous decision versus Yale Katoga. Leapai Jr. won by a TKO in round 3 versus Johnson. Scott won by unanimous decision versus Messam. Lodge drew versus Tuma. Clenshaw drew vs Campbell. Akuzo won by majority decision vs Waterman to become WBC Australian Light Heavyweight Champion. McCall won by TKO round 2 versus Fraser. Shizora is set to fight Miller February 8th. I think that is a great fight, and I'm glad to see it's actually being made. Just to touch upon that McCall Fraser fight, McCall, an ex-world champion from the 90s, is about similar age as that as what we saw against Mike Tyson just the last week, and so yeah, it was a weird one that he was even back in the ring, but he boxed, he won against another guy who was very old and didn't really have the best of records either, and I believe he called out Jake Paul afterwards. So you never know what's going to happen. Hearn has said a second Matchroom vs Queensbury 5v5 could happen in May, so Eddie Hearn trying to avenge that. I think Eddie Hearn's signing a few fighters at the moment. There's one in which I will touch upon in a moment, and I think perhaps he might be getting them for this kind of 5v5s just to build that credibility back, because he doesn't want to. I don't think he wants to put in his best names. I don't think he wants to put in a Joshua. I don't think he wants to put in a Ennis or a Bam Rodriguez into one of these 5v5s, but I think he wants to have a collection of fighters who perhaps are a little bit lower down than that, who are able to fight at a high level, and like the likes of somebody that they signed, Cambosos Jr., that could be a name to have involved, and that wouldn't surprise me if he is put into something like a 5v5. I think that's perfect matchmaking realistically at the moment for his career. But like I say, that's just my kind of thoughts. Moving on, Johnson is set to rematch Hughes in February. Zabek will fight Rozensky December 7th. Like I say, Cambosos Jr. has joined Matchroom and DeBella Promotions in a co-promotion, and it's an interesting signing in general. Lopez has teamed up with Reynoso. I think that is a great partnership and a great coach to have on board. Oki won via TKO in round 2 versus Denya. Agius won via points versus Yaha. Maycock won via points versus Zion. Herzeni won via points versus At Rokau. Bermeta won via TKO round 4 versus Vergiev. Heiser won via KO in round 2 versus Bracamonte. Georgiev won via KO in round 1 versus England. Rogers won via points versus Caicedo. Smith won via points versus Gomez. Lloyd Taylor Jr. won via points versus Zamora. Laws won via points versus Seslak. Alishk won via points versus Sakharov. Pattinson won via points versus Atonov. Ingram won via points versus Oliveira. Brown won via points versus Sosa. Talwood won via TK round 6 versus Nova. Marksby won via TK round 2 versus Kisiona. Eubank won via unanimous decision versus Erdogan. And, it was an interesting Mossman card, I suppose. It's just one of them cards again. It was just them putting a bunch of names on in kind of 4-round, 6-round contests. A lot of them ending in points. Some people it was nice to see returning back to winning ways, or carrying on with their winning rate, that their winning ways and their undefeated records, like the likes of a Smith. Some of you I've interviewed. It's a pleasure to see him. Great to see him carrying on. Laws getting back to winning ways was entertaining. He's seemingly going to branch into that misfits market, which I think is perfect for him realistically. Leash was nice to see her get another win and progress on. I'm sure now. Pattinson was good to see him get back to winning ways. Ingram was a good thing again. See him get back to winning ways. Talwood was probably the highlight of the night, the biggest win of the night, and again cementing his name, carrying on that kind of name. And I just don't know necessarily if Wasserman's going to give him enough. He's a very, very skilled fighter, and I would love to see him progress on well, but I'm just not sure if Wasserman's going to give him enough of that and, give him enough of a push and put him against enough opponents or good enough opponents when he does get to that level. But we'll see, a great performance again from him and probably stand out. Marksby was surprising, if anything, to see him get the stoppage. He'd never gotten a stoppage, I believe, in his career, and, a second round stoppage just like that. And yeah, that was a big win for him. But then the Eubank fight was just a very, very dull fight, realistically. Not really much happened. There was a lot of hugging, and it wasn't really an entertaining contest. Yet again, Eubank Jr., or Eubank, I mean, he could be pushed a lot more, and he should be fighting a lot more better guys, but it's just not really happening. And that was just again a poor performance, realistically. Where, like I said, I would love to see him go against somebody of a bigger name, these kind of names in which he's getting talked about, these Adam Azims, these Dalton Smiths, but it's just not really happening. And this was just one of them fights again. Moving on, Jones won by split decision versus Hermans to become IBO and IBF World Super Welterweight Champion. And Katsurakis won via split decision versus Adams. And that Jones fight, got my prediction right for it. I think I said it would have been a unanimous decision, but Jones, she looked good through kind of the early to mid rounds. She was landing relatively clean throughout most of the exchanges. She seemed like she was the physically stronger and the more powerful out of the two, which I kind of expected. Hermans came on good. A lot of the time the work was a bit sloppy and a bit messy, but when she was on the front foot into the later rounds, she seemed like she was having success and she clawed back a few rounds. I didn't think it was enough to be a split decision, but nonetheless, Jones becomes a world champion now, and I think that's a good world champion to have about. I think it's a tough name. I think it's a top name. I think it is getting to a point where some of the some of the women's world champions in recent times and in history haven't always been the best of fighters, but I think there is a selection of fighters who are coming through that are actually becoming some top world champions now, and I think it's going to make for some really interesting contests soon, and that's what I'd like to see. And that was a good win, and that final as well, Katsurakis, that split decision was a good split decision as well. To be fair, an entertaining contest, and OTX, I'm enjoying what they're doing with their fights, their matchups. I think they're good fights. Moving on, Hoffman won by TKO round 3 versus Zongo. Guak Dumdan won via KO round 5 versus Morokoima to become IBO Youth Lightweight Champion. Sioksaj won via unanimous decision versus Zakoyi to remain EBU European Heavyweight Champion. Ruperich won via unanimous decision versus Matsuda to become WBA, WBO, WBC World Atomweight Champion. And that was again a performance in which I got my prediction right for. It was a good performance from Ruperich. It was a come forwards fight where she did just kind of outwheel Matsuda and got a nice knockdown as well in the process. And I think she looks like a much better fighter at atomweight than she did at minimum weight. I don't necessarily know, like I say, if it's the level of opposition or not, but in general, I think she looked much better, and she was, like I say, walking her down. There was a few exchanges, but in general she looked like she was catching everything, or majority of things that Matsuda was throwing, and responding back with much better, stronger strikes, and like I say, more than deserved to become the have them 3 belts. And I think she is going to go on to probably become undisputed. I mean, the other world championship fight that was on that card was Batiki versus Yamanaka. That was cancelled due to Batiki missing weight. So I don't know necessarily if that makes for a vacant belt or not, but I think Ruperich could very much stake a claim for herself to become undisputed atomweight world champion. It's not an accolade which is put on too high of a pedestal in boxing at the moment, but it's definitely something that could be, and I think it's growing, and she's the face of it at the moment, and that was a very good performance. And out in Germany, right in front of our home fans, it was, like I say, a very good performance. Moving on to the MMA news now, like I say, not loads of news this week in general through both boxing and MMA. But Cruz hasn't retired yet. That is Dominic Cruz. He said that he wants to come out and have another fight, and I think there are fights there in the bantamweight division if he's coming back into the bantamweight division that's there for him. But he's an entertaining fighter, and it's interesting whenever he's about because he also speaks well as well, and so yeah, it's intriguing whenever he's about, and I'm hoping that he's going to be fighting again soon. Alvarez will fight Stevens January 25th in bare knuckle, and I think that is a great matchup. I just love seeing these kind of legendary UFC fighters going at it. Not saying Jeremy Stevens is the biggest legend, but in general, it's a great contest, I think, and yeah, going to make for an entertaining contest like all majority of the BKFC fights are realistically, and it's interesting to see how McGregor's kind of going to be around that as well with two, well, an exponent in Alvarez and Stevens as well. Of course, everybody knows that who the fuck is that guy type meme. That's going to be an interesting contest. Nurmagomedov will fight Hughes January 25th. I think that is an underrated Bellator fight, which is a very highly skilled fight. Weidman will fight Anders December 7th. Prochazka will fight Hill January 8th. I think that's a good fight as well. There's a few matchups that can be made in light heavyweight division through and around the contenders, and I think that's one that should be made. I think also after this weekend, Carlos Ulberg should be kind of put into that picture as well, so hopefully we'll see that. Motto won via decision versus Ma Shate. Xiao won via KO round 3 versus Kwang. Cavagna won via decision versus Tocha. Hernandez won via decision versus two men Dem Barrow. She won via KO in round 3 versus Xion Kan. Choi won via KO round 1 versus Sahota. Su Young won via decision versus Jia Lia Si. Ming Yang won via KO round 1 versus Diaz. Ulberg won via decision versus Uzdemir. Fernandez won via submission round 2 versus Kong. Salikov won via KO round 1 versus Kenan. Xiaonan won via decision versus Richie. And Yan won via decision versus Figueiredo. And I think that was an interesting card. It's a nice Chinese card, and showed some big names. I mean, the Ming Yang, I think he's somebody who can progress very well. Just getting continuous first round stoppages now, and another one. I think, like I say, he could progress well and possibly be in the rankings in soon. And he's a big name coming out of China. The way that he's got this momentum at the moment is looking very good. Ulberg, like I say, was in an entertaining contest, but was getting the better of pretty much every exchange. Even when he was on the back foot, he was planting his feet and landing quite strong. And Uzdemir took some big shots, and a good decision win for him against a tough competitor in Uzdemir, who is able to upset the apple cart and beat some top ranked guys. And that moves Ulberg on. Like I say, hopefully now into the higher rankings fight, possibly like a Rakic fight, so it could be next or something like that. I won't mind that at all. Fernandez, that submission versus Kong was a very surprising one. Of course, nobody. Well, everybody was expecting Kong to come through. Of course, she came through with the whole Joker kind of vibe in the weigh-in, but that head kick, it can disrupt anybody, and it's been shown to do that multiple times. And that was a surprising submission, but a very good submission by Fernandez. Salikov, that spinning wheel kick was a very creative but good way to get to stoppage again. The second time which he's done that now, I believe. And yeah, that was at 40 years of age, a great win for himself as well. Xiaonan, that decision versus Ricci was comfortable realistically, and coming off the loss versus Zhang, you weren't really too sure where she'd be at, what she'd be like, and Ricci is a live opponent, but Ricci was just never able to get in range, never able to kind of get up close with Xiaonan. Xiaonan was pretty much just having comfortable exchanges on the feet where she was able to have a lot of success and just kind of show her size against that of Ricci, and she did that very well. And Ricci, I think I would have preferred, a different game plan. I think she should have made adjustments in the fight, but she just didn't. And Xiaonan carries on that contendership at number 1, and perhaps we'll see the rematch versus Zhang, because that first fight was relatively close as well. And then the Yan Figueiredo decision, I got my prediction wrong for that one. I thought Figueiredo was going to be able to do it, but Yan looked good. I think he looked very controlled in his strikes. I think Figueiredo has a very good chin, but Yan was able to have a lot of success again, and he was, I think, clear in that win realistically. I mean, Figueiredo just wasn't realistically able to get off what he wanted to get off, and I think that was a very good performance by Yan, and that's, like I say, put him right back into contention for it. I think it's interesting to see that Dvalishvili, I saw that he reacted to the fight and that he's very keen to make the rematch between the two of them, but I find it interesting how he is so keen to make the rematch, but then isn't really wanting to fight Nurmagomedov. I don't necessarily know. I mean, Johan has more better accolades and has been unfortunate in decisions in the past, but I thought Devash really beat him quite convincingly. So I don't necessarily know, like I say, if that was a fight that's deserving to go straight into a world title fight when you do have Erman and the Magomedov just kind of sat there waiting around. So I don't know. It's interesting to see, but I'm still up for the Jan versus Dvalishvili 2 fight, and Figueiredo now. I think that might have cut his chances of ever becoming a UFC world champion again, which is sad because he is a very good fighter on his day, but I don't necessarily know how much there's left for him in the UFC. And Romero won by a KO in round 1 versus Crespo. I don't even know if this is a fully sanctioned fight, but it was the first kind of introduction of Mike Perry's dirty bare knuckle street fight type thing. I forgot what the actual name's called of the promotion, but it's entertaining, I suppose. Yeah, I brought out some big names. I mean, I saw John Jones was there. It looked like it was in some dark back alley, but I suppose that's what it's going to be, and it looked good. I mean, Romero at the age in which he's at, I think it's like 40 something, he was able to get a very good stoppage. I don't know who the guy was against, who the guy he was against is, but it was a destructive stoppage, and perhaps there is, a little bit available for Mike Perry to slide in and do his thing with his promotion if he has big names like Romero able to do that. We'll have to wait and see if it still progresses the same. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did need a like video, subscribe if you are new, and thanks for watching.